Hey everybody, welcome back to part 13 of our series on building the advanced blog and CMS. So I've got good news and I've got bad news. I don't know how to say this. So obviously good news, I do have my camera here as you can see. I got the hub in, it came, I ordered it on Prime Day and I ordered it on Prime Day and it didn't fully check out that night. So luckily I got it before it was still on sale. But it was like a day later, so I thought it was already on its way. Well, by then, I guess they were back ordered on, shipping or something. And so normally it should take 2 days to get here. But then they said it wasn't going to be here till Tuesday, which is the day I ordered it. So it was a whole week away, which didn't quite make sense because it was Prime Day. So Prime Day is like celebrating Amazon Prime, which is 2-day shipping. And then to celebrate Amazon Prime, they tell me, oh, we can't do it in 2 days. It's going to be a week. Like, that was a little counterintuitive. But regardless, they said it was going to be a week away. And then I got it on Saturday. So they said it was going to be a whole week. I got it in 5 days, 4 days, whatever. Anyway, so kind of bittersweet there. Got it a little later than expected, but also earlier than they said it was going to be. So it kind of worked itself out. So here we go. Got my USB hub back. I now have like 10 ports. I don't know how many. I got a whole bunch of ports now for my computer so I can plug in all the great things. And part of that is having a microphone, a camera, and all the other components for my computer. So we can now do face cams. That's the good news. Now the bad news. So the bad news is that I went to film a video for you guys today. We were going to do permissions and we were going to set up the permissions so you can create permissions through the user interface on our blog. That was the plan. And I did it. That's good. But what ended up happening was I filmed this whole video, went to go edit it, and then realized that I was filming the wrong screen. So I filmed a whole screen where I guess you could listen to me talk because the video went through, the audio went through, all that went fine, but you just couldn't see into the code because the code was on a different screen. So you could only see like a blank screen that didn't have anything on it. So, I mean, I guess if you wanted to listen to the audio, then there's that. But I assume that none of you guys really want to listen to an audio without seeing any of the code. So I went ahead and just scrapped the whole footage. It was all a waste. And so then I was forced to have a couple different decisions here. Do I just undo all the work I did and then redo it with you guys just so you guys can see it? That seems like a lot of unnecessary work. I really don't want to have to do all that work over again. So nothing exciting happened in the video. It was basically we're doing CRUD for our permissions. So unfortunately, the footage was lost of me typing all the code. So I'm going to make it up to you guys we'll walk you through what I did. We'll kind of go through it that way. You don't need to sit and watch me type. I'm just going to explain everything I did, get you guys up to speed with where we are. And then the next video, I'm going to double check and make sure that I actually filmed the right screen before I start recording. So yeah, that's basically where we're at. So let's go ahead. I'm going to show you guys what I've done. And then just so you guys know what it is, you guys can go, I'll have a link down to GitHub in the description. If you want to go look there, you can read all the code changes over there in the diffs and do it that way. But let's go ahead and take a look at what I've done. So first of all, let's start by looking at the browser and show you what I did in the browser. So you click on roles and permissions. And sure enough, here you've got a whole bunch of roles and permissions. Here, before we do that, let's go to our browser. I'm going to delete a bunch of ones that I'd created. So okay, just wanted to delete some of the ones that I had made to like test everything out, so you guys can see. We'll create some, and then you guys can see it. Okay, so here we go. Here's our index page. I basically did a lot of copying from what we did in the previous video, which is when we did users. So I did a lot of just copying the user interface. I figured, why reinvent the wheel? Not a lot of people are going to see this other than probably me. So this is really, and I'm not going to be building new resources or permissions very often. Generally, whatever we have is what we have. So I don't really need to plan on being here very much. So I didn't want to put a ton of stress and work into the user interface because it's just not going to get used very often. So here we go. We've got permissions. We've got a list of all the permissions. You can see we've got the name, the slug, and then the description. And then you can view it or you can edit it. And so you view it. It takes you to view the permission. This is what it looks like. That's the name, create users. That's the description, and that's the slug. So that's that. If you want to create a new permission, you click here, and then you got a permissioned form. This is where you can put in the name, the friendly human readable name. Then you have the slug, which is like all lowercase with a dash and so forth. And then you have your description here to describe what the permission would do. You can click create permission. It creates a brand new permission. So like we can test this here. We'll say view dashboard. View dash dashboard. And then for description, we'll just say okay, so there we go. Then you can create the permission. It's going to come back in here. Now you have view dashboard. You successfully created the permission. So great. That's cool. Now I created another way with view to basically create another type of permission. So I figured there's two types of permissions you would ever create. You're going to have like your one-off permissions. These are things like view the dashboard. You just have one specific permission you want to allow someone to do. And then you're going to have most of your permissions are going to be CRUD-based permissions. So I created a little interface here where you could actually basically in one fell swoop create all the CRUD permissions that you would need. So if you think about like if you're managing blog posts, you would have like create blog post, read blog post, update, and delete blog posts. You guys are familiar with all that. But you would basically make 4 permissions to manage that. And if you look at kind of the defaults that come with Laratrust, there is, well, that's what you see here. So you have users is the resource. And then you have 4 of them. You have create dash users, read dash users, update dash users, delete dash users. So I got thinking, I'm like, why manually create 4 different ones? What if we just automated that? So I made that. And so same with the name, the display name is basically just like this, but instead of a dash, we have a space, and then we make it a little easier to read. So we have a capital C and a capital U here to make create users. So I figured let's make this, and that's what we did. So we automated that here with this. So now we have this option where you can make a basic permission or a CRUD-based permission. If you do a CRUD-based permission, then you can type in the name of the resource. Like if you wanted to do posts, you could say I want to create the resources posts, and then we want to do create, read, update, and delete for posts. We want to create 4 permissions, and you can see here it's going to create posts, and then the slug will be create dash posts. And then the description will be allow a user to create a posts. So I know there's a little grammatical error there, but I decided not to worry about the little minor details. I didn't want to go in and worry about singularity and plurality and all that stuff, and whether there's, instead of doing like a and an, if there's a vowel for this resource and stuff. I didn't want to worry about that. It really is it's not that important. So this gets the gist across. So I figured it's not grammatically correct all the time, but that'll be okay. So that's the thing here. So it creates 4 resources. Let's say we don't need to do the delete resource. We don't need that resource. Then we'll just create those 3. And so you can check, these resources, and it will do all of that here. And there we go. So you can create those here. So that's pretty cool. And then of course this varies. So like forum, there you go. Create forum, read forum, and it does all of that here. So let's go ahead and do posts. We're going to create all of those and then click create permissions. Sure enough, down here you can see create posts, read posts, update posts, delete posts. We have our slugs for all of those, and then we have descriptions. Allow a user to create a post, to read a post, delete, update, whatever. Okay, so that's what we've done. That's basically our permissions in a nutshell. Now you might wonder also, where is the delete for a permission? Well, I decided not to do delete because delete is only going to cause problems. So the reason for that is, like if you have a permission, I don't really think there's very many use cases where you're going to delete a permission, and I think it might just cause more problems. It could cause errors with the application if someone accidentally deletes it, and you're just not going to be deleting permissions. Usually once you create a permission, there's not much use case where you're no longer going to have that permission. If something does happen down the road where we need to delete a permission for some reason, it doesn't need to be in the database anymore, then we can always go in the database and delete it. The database is set up for the way the migration was set up. It will, delete on cascade, if you delete it and stuff. So it'll work out fine. We can just do it in the SQL browser, but I don't really see any point in doing it here. So if you actually look at our Let me make a bigger one here. If we actually look here at our routes, I went ahead and got rid of it. So there is no resource to delete a permission anymore. Okay, so here you can see we have permissions, store, index, create, update, and show, and edit. So we got rid of the delete, so there is no delete function to delete a permission anymore. Okay, so we did that as well. So now let's go ahead and take a look at the code just so you can see it. But again, all this is going to be, I'll link it in the description. You can go over to GitHub and look at it. So the code will still be available. You're just not going to be able to see me type it. So let's start off with I created 2 new controllers, permission controller and role controller. I didn't get to role in this video, so because of that, we'll just do that in the next video, so you guys will get to see me create the roles. So this is a basic CRUD controller is all I did here. So it's just a basic resource controller. Permission controller, same thing, basic resource controller, but we've filled it in. Let's go ahead and take a look at it. So on index, all we do is get all of the permissions. I didn't want to paginate, just get all of them. We're just going to display all the permissions here. You're not going to view this page very often, so we'll just load them all. Okay, so, and then you basically return the view to show the index, basic stuff. You're going to pass the permissions in. So that's all that happens here. We don't even really need to look at the code. You guys can use your imagination on what happens here. Since you guys have seen, if I go here, this is what it is. So we pass in the permissions and we basically we just loop through it and create a table. You guys know what all this is. You can look at the code individually if you'd like. There's just nothing really exciting to see there. Okay, and then on create, this is where we show the form. Basically just return the view that has the form. That's it. I'll show you that form because there's some view stuff in there we want to look at, but I'll finish this page before we go there. Well, let's jump over, we'll come back. So let's go take a look at that really quick. If we go over to under manage folder, permissions, we have create.blade.php. Inside of here, this is the same header that we're used to, just says create new permission. And then here's our form. We're submitting to store, we have our CSRF. And then up here at the top is where we created our, this is the radio box. So just to remind you guys what we're looking at here, when we create a new permission, remember we have this option here to choose a basic permission or a CRUD permission. That's what we're reading here. So we have a radio group. The value is either basic or CRUD depending on which option they have selected. And it's going to link to this model in view, permission type. So if I scroll all the way down here, you can see in our view object, we have 3 items of data here. We've got permission type, resource, and CRUD selected. So permission, it's gonna, the default's gonna be basic. So that's gonna mean that first radio button is selected by default. And this V model just makes sure whatever value we select gets updated in the view object. Okay? Now this, and this, these 3 are just basic text fields that display the display name, the slug, and the description for our one-off resource, okay? So once again, if you look at basic permission, it's just 3 basic text fields. That's all these are. The reason I did description as a text field instead of a text area is because in the database, it's only a varchar 255. So there's really no point in doing a whole text area because it can only accept 255 characters. So I went ahead and just left it as a text box. So there's nothing exciting here. You guys have seen that. That's what happens here. The only thing I did is you can see at the top of each of these, I do a v-if permission is equal to basic. So if permission type, if the selected option is basic, then we will display these 3 options. If it's not, then it will hide them. So that's what you're seeing here. That's why when you click the radio box, it shows or hides them. So that's what we did there. Okay, now moving down, we've got this block here. These are hidden under the opposite. So if permission type is equal to CRUD, then it's going to display these fields. So when we view CRUD, we get this text field here. Then we get this column that has these 4 checkboxes. And then we have over here, we've got this table. Okay? So that's what we're seeing here. So we show it if it's equal to CRUD. And then same here. We have this whole bottom section is if it's equal to CRUD. This is a basic text field. You can see it's called resource. This gets the name of the resource that we're wanting to create. It's tied to the model for resource, so our view object gets updated. So down here at the bottom, this will update depending on the value of resource. That's important later because that's how we decide, like create posts and stuff like that is we grab the value of the resource, which is posts. That's what's put inside that text box. So that's that. Then down here, we've got our checkboxes. We've got our four checkboxes. So once again, we're tying these to the model. CRUD selected is the object inside of our data here. And then each of these have a value: create, read, update, and delete. If you go back down here, you can see they get inserted as an array. So by default, they're all checked. And if you uncheck them, then this array will get, removed from or whatever. So if you uncheck read, it'll just be create, update, and delete. Okay, so that's all that is there. And then now we've got our fancy table. So this is the table right here. Looks nice and small. We basically have 3 columns: name, slug, description. In our body, we only show this body if the resource is the length of that resource field up here, this input box. We only want to do it if it's 3 characters or more. I made this decision because, first of all, in the back end of Laravel, I didn't want to make a resource, like I didn't want to do create dash L, like that, just random, like 1 letter or 2 letters. I made a decision. I'm like, I want all the resources to be at least 3 letters. So you actually have a meaningful, like something meaningful basically. So I did the same thing here. So I didn't want to show, like, while you're beginning to type it, I didn't want it to show, like here's I type posts, P, O. I didn't want to, fill this in with just P and O, S, T. So now we've got 4 of these. Now the actual idea here is that you could have a 3-letter one, so I should change that actually. So we should do greater than or equal to 3. So that way when you hit that 3rd item, P, O, we got to refresh. So when you hit P, O, and then S, it will start doing it. And then as we, update it, it fills it in. Okay, so then we just go through and create a new row, a table row here, and we loop through it with view. So we do item in CRUD selected. So we're looping through this array. So there's potentially 4 items. But if one's unchecked, then it will not be in here. And then the loop will just skip over that item. That's why it goes away when we uncheck the box. And then we have 3 columns which correspond with these columns up here. Pretty basic stuff. We basically set text equal to, and then I created a function for each of these. So we have CRUD name, CRUD slug, and then CRUD description, and we pass in item into each of these. Now item is the currently looped item that we're selecting through, so it'll be like create, read, update, or delete. Those will be the 4 potential ones. So that's that, and then it basically does that. So now what do these methods do? So down here we have the methods. So CRUD name accepts the item, simply returns the item. What this is doing here, this is the long, complicated JavaScript way of adding a uppercase letter at the beginning for the first word, or for the first letter in the word. That's what this is doing. Creates a space and then does the same thing here for the resource. So we're grabbing the value of resource from up here, and then we are uppercasing the first letter, and that's what we're seeing. That's what this does, just uppercase the first letter there. So it's basically you've got item like create, and then a space, and then the name of the resource, posts. So create space posts. And that's the CRUD name. And that's what gets put into this first column here. Now the second column is CRUD slug. So same thing here. We go all lowercase on the item. So create, read, update, those are the items. So we go all lowercase, a dash, all lowercase of the name of the resource. Pretty easy. And then for CRUD description, this is where we created the allow a user to, and then we do create and then the name of the resource. So that's the formula we did there. So you can see here what we did. We made the item, the verb, we made it all capitals just to stand out. And then we do the same thing over here that we do up here, where we just capitalize the first letter. So that's what we're doing with all that. And that's it. That's basically it. So when we create permissions, we are doing just that. Okay, so that's everything there. Let's take a look at, let's see, what else do we have? Let's go back to our controller. So when we store now, all that full form, submits to store. So now when we store, we're basically going to check what kind of request it is. It's either going to be a basic request, meaning it's a one-off permission, or it's a CRUD request. So if it's a CRUD request, if it's a basic request, I guess, that's what we're checking here at the beginning, then we're going to do all of this. If it's a CRUD request, as you see here, then we're going to do all of this. If it's not one of those two things, then that means something went horribly wrong, and we want to redirect the user back with the input so they can try again. Okay? So that's basically what's happening here. Everything inside of here is pretty basic as far as like just a normal, this is a normal store for storing a new resource. So we validate, we are checking to make sure that the name is unique. That needs to be unique. But other than that, basic validation. And then we basically submit it like you would submit anything else. And then you just have a flash message says your permission was created, and then we redirect them back to the index page. And if it's a CRUD, this is where things get a little more interesting, but it's still basically the same. We're basically going to validate. This time we're only validating the resource because that's the only thing that got passed in. So we're making sure there's a resource was passed in. And then after that, what we're basically going to do is we're going to loop through the value of the CRUD. And this is all the checkboxes as an array. So if there's 4 of them, there'll be 4 items, and it will be the first item in the array will be create, the second one would be read, and so forth. So it's going to loop through each of those here, and every time it loops through it, it's basically going to create its own name, description, and slug for each of those, and it's also going to create a new permission, and then it's going to redo the loop until it runs out of items in the array. So that's how we create however many they've made. So here you can see we have a variable slug. We basically do the same thing we did with the JavaScript. We're just doing the PHP version of it. So we'll have string to lower. We'll pass it in. We'll have a dash, and then same thing here, request resource. This should also be string to lower. So good thing I caught this, str to lower. There we go. And then display name. Okay, so in here we all do all uppercase. The display, or sorry, not all uppercase. We just uppercase the first of each word. So we're going to do, you know, the X is whatever we're currently looping through, create, read, update, or delete. It's one of those. And then we do a space and then the name of the resource. And then we just UC words is the first letter of each word. And then description, we just put together a sentence just like before. Allow a user to create a post or whatever. Okay, then we just, now that we've got these created, slug, display name, and description, we just go ahead, create a new permission, and then set that up here to be equal to what we just created. We save the permission, and then we loop back until we run out of items to loop through. Once that's done, then it's your basic thing, flash a message, a success message, redirect the user, basic stuff. Okay, when you show a user basic stuff, you're gonna grab the permission, show the display page. There's not much to see there. We just show the 3 pieces of information that there is, display name, slug, description. Edit, same exact thing. We grab the current permission from the database. We're gonna pass it into this, just like show, except it's a form instead of a static page. So it's the exact same thing, except we're automatic. Instead of, you know, filling in text, we're just gonna fill in the input fields. So that's what that is. Then here for update, this is when we, you know, submit the update. Then it's just like before, any other update, nothing crazy here. The one thing I wanted to note is that I made a decision not to allow a user to change the actual name of the permission, because that's the important part of the permission. The display name and the description really doesn't matter. That's just for our, you know, for the purposes of the user interface and stuff like that, making it easier to manage, making it more human readable. But the actual really important thing, the thing that's hard-coded into the code base here, is that name of the permission. And I don't want to be able to edit it accidentally or something like that. If you accidentally did like create posts and you accidentally got rid of the S and it's create post, that would cause huge problems in your application. Tons of users would no longer be able to have access to all these things, and it would be really hard to track down what caused that bug. You'd be looking through your code, and you would everything would look all right, but it's a database problem, and that's a hard thing to track down if you didn't know what you were looking for. So I made the decision not to edit that. So when you look at the update function, you can see we only validate display name and description. We don't validate the actual slug. And that's because we're not actually inputting the slug either. So I didn't bother validating it. And it is also a disabled field in the database. Of course, someone could try to tweak it and submit an edited one, but it won't matter because we're not submitting it. So if they wanted to do that, then good for them. It won't make any difference. So here we just grab it, set these new 2 values, save it, add a success message, redirect them. Pretty basic. And then destroy is empty because we got rid of that route. So if we look in our routes over here, you can see we have route resource permissions. It's inside of our manage. And then we have, it all links to the permission controller. We have an exception here, so we do not have the destroy method, but otherwise everything else it creates. So that's kind of the rundown on what we did in the video that you guys all missed out on. So it was like kind of a long video because I was just kind of recording as I went. It was like an hour long, so this saved you guys a bunch of time. If you guys want to go through and read the code, all the code will be in the linked in the description. It will be available on GitHub. You can go ahead and look at the diff for the commit to see what I've changed line by line, and you can go through and read it. You guys are welcome to leave comments if you have questions on anything. I know a lot of you guys were leaving comments on the last one, and I went through and replied to them if you guys had questions. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to comment on the code block, or you can comment on a single line of code, whatever you want, and then I'll leave replies to explain it. But that's basically it. That's permissions. So we've done CRUD for our permissions now. We have an ability to manage, edit, and create new permissions. So now the next video is going to focus around roles. We need to manage roles, and then we need to be able to link permissions to roles. Okay, and then after that, it may be the same video, it might be different, I'm not sure. After that, the next step would be then to take users and link roles to users, okay? So those are kind of our next steps in this series. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this. I apologize again for losing all that footage and ruining it, but I wanted to go through and explain it for those of you guys that wanted to still see what I was doing and understand it, because I know a lot of you guys are using this you're using this project as a way to learn, how a larger scale project is put together. So you don't want to miss any steps. So I wanted to just make this video to show you guys what I did. So I go through all the code and stuff like that.